Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone across the globe joining us today. This is Bridget from Acquia. Today's webinar is Crafting Insight-Driven Journeys with Google Analytics 360 and Acquia, with Alex Moore and Jonathan Weber from Bounteous and David Aponovich from Acquia. Just a couple housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any audio issues, please send them in the Q&A tab and I will assist you. If you have any questions for the presenters, please submit them in the Q&A tab as well, and they will answer them at the end of the presentation. Slides and the recording of this webinar will be posted to acquia.com and also sent to you via email within the next few days. And without further ado, I will pass it over to David.
Excellent. Thank you for the introduction and welcome to our guests. This webinar, Crafting Insight-Driven Journeys with Google Analytics 360 and Acquia, is part of a continuing series of webinars that Acquia is hosting. I call them the best of talks from Acquia Engage, our customer conference, which was held in November. This was one of our more popular sessions during our Acquia Engage conference, and we're glad to have Bounteous back to talk about this topic today with us. The webinar today, we promised, is going to help you be able to measure, understand, and influence the customer journey, and it's extremely timely, as we know, that organizations everywhere, especially marketers, are pressed harder than ever to try and prove value and engage with their customers in new, better ways. And the customer journey is a big part of that, and evolving strategies and tactics to get there. We promised today that our session is going to help you take the guesswork out of decision making and introduce an analytics-driven approach to delivering content and experiences that can improve engagement and business results. Of note too, don't worry if you're not using all or any of the products mentioned in the title of the webinar, whether you're using Drupal or Acquia Cloud or Acquia Lift and Journey or even Google Analytics. You may be using some or all. Bottom line, we'll use this webinar to teach you more about data, analytics, segmentation, and personalization, and other topics that you can bring right back to your marketing activities and find success with. So with that, I'd like to introduce and have them introduce themselves, Alex Moore from Bounteous and Jonathan Weber, also from Bounteous. Alex, would you like to introduce yourself and your background?
Yeah, thank you, David. My name is Alex Moore. I lead the analytics and insight team at Bounteous, formerly Lunametrics. Over the last 6 years, have helped to grow the team into one of the premier Google Analytics certified partners in North America and one of the premier Acquia partners in the world. Very happy to be here.
And this is Jonathan Weber. I'm Director of Data Platforms at Bounteous. And so I have a deep background in Google Analytics and Google Marketing Platform tools, but my job is really thinking about how do we take that data and connect it to other systems like Acquia Lift and Journey, which is something we're going to talk about today, and really make use of data and get value out of it for the types of marketing problems and customer experience problems that we're facing.
Excellent. We're really happy to have you both here today and glad to have two experts on the line with us. If we can flip to the next screen, I'll tell you a bit about Acquia. Acquia is a leading provider of cloud-based, data-driven journey technology to build, manage, and activate digital experiences at scale. This topic is near and dear to our heart because we help our customers every day with providing them with a platform to build their sites, their web applications, and their digital experiences that span channels, devices, and screens. And this idea of optimizing that is a big part of what we're trying to focus on with our Acquia Lift and Acquia Journey products, part of our Marketing Hub technologies. Many of you on this call I know are customers of Acquia. Some of you are not. So we're glad to be able to introduce our technologies to you in a context that matters and shows you value of how you can gain value out of using them. Acquia has over 3,000 customers worldwide, and a great number of Fortune 100 companies are using our technologies to improve and to drive digital experiences with Acquia's products. I'll pass the baton now over to our two guests, Alex and Jonathan, to take it away from here.
Great, thanks, David. So as David mentioned, today we're speaking about crafting insight-driven journeys with Google Analytics 360 and Acquia. So what exactly are we proposing? What can data do for your personalized journey orchestration? So we'll call out a few things here. So these are aims for us to surface personas in the data to personalize our content and our advertising. We'll be speaking about this. To categorize content using data and develop a content-based attribution model so that we can understand which content is working for which personas. Third, we'll propose conducting experiments using the right tools to find the combinations of content that work the best for those different personas. We want to use data to initiate a design focus around the most influential steps in the journey to prioritize which steps are worth then having designers come and improve those journeys. To refine marketing spends around measurable touchpoint ROI using data. And finally, to extend the learnings from this exercise to data-driven prospecting or lookalike audiences. So once you have the personas, then to be able to extrapolate to other similar personas. So how can we do this? Well, Acquia provides the digital experience platform, Google provides the analytics platform, and then we can provide the expertise to execute the program, and we'll talk about all of this today. So our agenda at a high level, we'll speak a little more about who we are. Jonathan will then talk deeply about insight-driven journeys and the Acquia and Google offering. We think that there is no combination of tools on the marketplace today that can deliver the same capability and value as Acquia and Google Analytics combined. Third, we'll speak about digital marketing maturity and how your organization fits into the model and how you can get started with these journeys. And finally, we'll wrap it up with some questions and answers. So again, please feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A panel, and we'll make sure we save time at the end. So who is Bounteous? We are a proud Acquia and Google partner, formerly known as HS2 Solutions and Lunametrics. We like to say that we create big picture digital solutions that help leading companies deliver transformational brand experiences. So what does that mean? Well, we build websites, we design apps, we conduct digital marketing, but we have to do it all in sync. In 2019, it's no longer appropriate to think of customer interactions as a series of disconnected experiences on different devices. It's just not going to fly in the marketplace. And so our mission is to ensure the smooth flow of data, insights, and interactions across the whole digital brand experience. We think that data is everything, and without data, there can be no synchronized, individualized experiences. And we know this is hard, but it's essential in order to drive transformative results. And so this is your mission too. We're made up of about 400 folks across all of North America, 5 different cities in the US and Canada. We have more Acquia Grandmasters and developer certifications than any other company besides Acquia themselves. And we're one of the premier Google marketing platform partners in North America. So today, we're creating insight-driven journeys using Acquia and Google Analytics to help to optimize our customers' digital experience and digital marketing. How? By discovering who the audience members really are and identifying the key moments that really matter. So whether you're a marketer or you know marketers in your organization, I think many of us would agree that these are some of the problems that marketers face today. How do we align our touch points in our brands with what we want our audience to do? And how do we reduce friction? When you think about the variety of experiences that any of our brands have, how do we ensure that there's commonality across each of those touch points in these diverse ecosystems? Second, how do we scale this with more and more customers and more demanding customers? In 2019, frankly, if you're not delivering customized experiences, you're really lagging behind. Personalization and journey orchestration are both increasingly the expectation from a more savvy audience. And finally, how do we enable our audience to engage with us consistently across online and offline channels? As marketers, we have a tendency to think about personalization as something that happens only on our website. But we also need to be thinking about how the brand is experienced through our digital advertising. So Jonathan will speak more about that. We believe, again, this is our thesis, that most successful investments come from finding the real moments that matter. Not all moments are created equal, and we can use data to identify the moments that really matter. Second, we want to coordinate and target our messaging and interactions across channels, including ad networks, to create a strong, consistent brand promise. And it's not one size fits all. Different audiences are going to have different needs. And fourth, the true source of personas is going to be provided by journey insights. It's going to be provided by data. Without good data, none of this is possible. So in order to do numbers 1 through 4, you have to have the right data, you have to have the right tools, you have to know how to use that data to uncover the right insights. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jonathan Weber.
Thanks, Alex. So I want to talk through how do we apply data to address some of these challenges that Alex just introduced. And we're going to get to the nuts and bolts stuff about the tools and about the Acquia platform and the Google platform, how they fit together. We'll get to that. But the place that I want to start is just by talking about this process in general and how data can help us. And we think that these tools, the Acquia and Google platforms, are a great solution to this, but the conceptual process that we're talking about here is really possible with any set of tools you might be using. And so we'll get to the specifics of the how, but for now I want to just talk in a big picture way about what does this process look like and how do we think about this and how do we use data to inform our answers to these questions. And so when we're thinking about putting together customer experiences, whether we're building new experiences or refining the ones that already exist, we often think about sort of two major phases there, design and implementation, right? In the design phase, we think about who are the customers or other audiences that we're serving, what sort of content do we need to fulfill those, what types of experiences do we want to build to enable those customers to complete the actions that we want them to complete. We come up with some design, and then in the implementation phase, we put that together using the tools that we have. So, we implement that content, we look at personalization and providing that content to the right audiences, and sort of all the nuts and bolts that go into content management and personalization and journey orchestration. I would argue that both at the beginning and at the end of that process, data and analysis is critical. Analysis is really important as an input to this process to provide us with critical information that we need as part of that design process. We're going to talk about some examples of what that looks like, but really the data helps us understand what those personas should be, what are the moments that matter in those journeys that we should focus our design efforts on. So it's a really important input to the design phase. Analysis is also a really important measurement of that design and implementation to understand how well does it perform and how can we incrementally make changes and improvements to make it even better as we go forward. So data and analysis is really important on both ends of this process, and we're going to talk about that. Now, to do this analysis, you have to have measurement in place, right? You have to be capturing data about what people do, all the behavioral data about the different touch points that you have with customers, whether that's on your website or it's off your website in other ways. It's advertising or marketing that happens on social media or display ads or search ads. It's messaging like email messaging or text messages or in-app messages that happen with your customers. So it's thinking about all the different touch points that customers have, and it's maybe non-digital stuff too, depending on what sort of business you have and how you interact with customers. We need the data about where and how we touch those customers and what they do in each of those touch points. We also need data about who the customers are. We want to understand those customers to whatever extent we can. Sometimes those folks are anonymous people who are visiting our website and we don't necessarily know a lot about them beyond the behavioral data. But a lot of times they're already an existing customer, or they're someone who's identified themselves in some way, like given us an email address or their contact information, or we have a site where folks log in and we know stuff about them. So any of that customer data about who those customers are, what our past relationship with them is, and any information that we can use to tie them together across multiple devices or multiple experiences, all of that is really useful as well. And then, finally, the most critical thing here is a real understanding of the conversions that we're trying to drive users toward. And sometimes that's really straightforward. If you have an e-commerce site, you're trying to get people to buy stuff, right? For other kinds of organizations, it's less straightforward to know what those conversions are for the different personas. But that's really something that we have to think through, and we'll talk about a few examples across a few different industries in the course of the examples that we talk about here. But it's really important that we understand what kinds of conversions we're trying to drive, whether that's purchases, whether it's leads, whether it's customer satisfaction. Those outcomes could be different depending on what type of organization you have, what types of digital experiences you have, and what types of users you have. But we need to think about what those outcomes are that we're trying to drive toward. So having measurement in place is sort of the baseline here, and sort of a foundational capability to be able to use the data in this design and implementation and evaluate that. So, assuming that we have some data about what people do and how they interact with us, this is, just sort of a gestural diagram of how a user might interact with us. Over on the left-hand side, they become aware of us in some way. Maybe they, do a Google search or get an ad or hear about us or, something like that, and go through a bunch of processes, maybe looking at stuff on our website, maybe getting email messages, all sorts of things that might happen. And eventually, hopefully, at the right-hand side, end up at some sort of conversion. And, like I said, that end conversion, it may be something monetary, like is implied by that $ there, like a purchase for an e-commerce site. But that outcome, could be all sorts of different things depending on what sort of industry you're in and what you're driving toward. So that outcome might be a purchase, it might be a lead, it might be customer satisfaction, it might be consuming content on your site, whatever is important to your organization. And if you've ever looked at your analytics data and sort of looked at all these different experiences, and hopefully you have a measurement in place, like I just described, to measure when people come to your website, what they do, tie that together with other information you have from, say, a marketing automation tool or an advertising tool about when those people got emails or saw ads. But if you've ever looked at that kind of data and sort of looked at the paths and the journeys that people go through, they're complicated. I mean, you see a lot of arrows on this slide pointing in lots of different directions, and that's just a sort of diagram to suggest how complicated these are. But the journeys that individuals go through are really complex, and they do all sorts of unexpected things. There's no easy way to say, here are the 4 stages that someone goes through, and it's not as nice and neat as that. We would love for it to be. But the data shows us that people's journeys are complicated. And so a really important part of the analysis here is to give us some focus around that and to be able to understand these in a digestible way so that we can focus on the parts of this that matter most. And we're going to talk about a little bit about how you do this with data and an example for a particular customer. But one way you might think about this is looking at the data to understand the attribution of these different touch points to that end conversion. So much in the same way you might think about attribution for marketing campaigns, which is a pretty common concept for marketers, understanding which marketing campaigns contribute to a conversion. We can think of all of these touch points as things that lead up to a conversion. And if we use the data to create an attribution model, we can start to understand which of these touch points are most important and most influential in getting a user to that end conversion. We can start to pare down what is most important about this process and pay less attention to the things that we know are less influential in getting users to that conversion. And even be fairly specific about the elements of that journey that sort of most deserve our attention in terms of how do we improve this journey, how do we make it better, how do we sort of lever those audiences into getting to this conversion we're trying to drive them toward. So it's a process of using the data to understand which are the moments that matter most in this process. And where should we focus once we get to that design phase, which we're going to talk about momentarily here. Where should we focus? Because we can't focus on everything all at once. We don't have the resources to do that. So what are the pieces of this journey we should focus on, whether that's personalization on a website, whether it's how we market through an email, whether it's some sort of advertising, or some combination of those things. But which are the touch points here that make the most difference in someone getting to that conversion? Data can help us answer that. Similarly, data can help us understand who the audiences actually are. So we know, or at least we think we know, a lot about who our audiences are based on your knowledge of your organization and who your users are and so on. And that's probably true. You do know a lot about your users from industry experience, maybe from prior data you've gathered from customers, maybe from actually talking to customers through focus groups and things like that. But often the data can help us illuminate those audiences and personas as well. So you may have personas that you've developed where you say, here's Susan and she's 35 years old and she's a mom and she's trying to do X and Y and Z, right? The data can help us understand those and where there might be things that we didn't know about what some of those personas should be, where there are personas we didn't expect, or there are aspects of those personas we didn't expect. So we can, again, use data to help inform that. The example here that I have on this slide is from a customer of ours. It's a hotel chain called Leading Hotels of the World. It's a hotel chain that has sort of luxury hotels worldwide. And they know from experience that they have different kinds of travelers who are interested in different stuff, right? There are business travelers, and there are people who are traveling for vacations or getaways, things like that. But the data can really help illuminate those personas and understand where they're right, where they might need to be refined, and so on. And so what we can do is use the data to understand the users. We can group together users based on similarity. That's this little diagram over here on the right is the output of a clustering analysis where we looked at a bunch of users who use the site and which kinds of content they looked at related to different amenities for the different hotels they were looking at. So these hotels, like I said, these are sort of luxury hotels, so they have lots of stuff like spa services and golf excursions and adventure excursions and things like that. So looking at all of those different amenities, we grouped together users based on what they were interested in. And what that allowed us to do was understand that there are the business travelers who are interested in, golf and conference rooms and things like that. There are people who are traveling with kids who are interested in a particular set of amenities. There are, adventure travelers who are interested in a particular set of amenities, et cetera. And not all of those are always surprising. Some of them may reinforce the personas that we already suspect or already know about. But often there's additional insight to be gained there from looking at the data and understanding those personas sort of from the bottom up rather than from the top down, which is often how we think about personas. So those work really nicely together to sort of refine how we think about those audiences, who they are, and what they're interested in. And so all of this becomes a really important input to design. And we really think about the design here of experiences as very much a sort of combination of right brain and left brain stuff, right? There's the data that informs this process, that helps us learn more about who these users are, helps us remove sort of gut decisions from the process or check our assumptions about what's important and what's not. And also, as I said, can help us focus our design expertise on the moments that are most important in these journeys. On the other hand, the experience design part is really important here as well. The data all by itself is not enough. The data tells us what people do now, and that's a very useful input here, but the data doesn't have any imagination. Designers have imagination, right? Designers can think about how this journey should work and what are the possibilities, and how can we best serve a customer based on design best practices, based on user feedback, all sorts of other inputs to this process that are important in thinking about how we design an experience. And so it's these two things together, really, this quantitative and qualitative analysis, or this left brain and right brain stuff, that help us put together a design for what that journey should look like. And really thinking about, what do we want those steps to be? How are we trying to channel a user through a process in those various steps? And where are the places that we're going to pay attention to? How do we personalize that? How do we make sure that we're serving those personas in appropriate ways and giving them the right content and the right messages along the way? So the data becomes a really important input to the design here. Now, of course, the output of that design is that we have to actually build an experience. We put together what it is we want users to do, and then we have to make it happen, right? And so the two major sort of platforms I want to talk about in combination here are the Acquia platform and the Google Marketing Platform. Because I think that together they help us do this. They help us sort of solve this problem. On the Acquia side, many of you are probably already familiar with Acquia and may already be Acquia customers. At a basis, it gives us a content management system and hosting and related capabilities for having a website and other digital experiences and providing content to users, right? So that's sort of a basic capability here. But the other tools in the Acquia family really help us extend that to the sort of personalization and journey orchestration and customization that we're talking about. So there's a few additional products here. Acquia Lift is a product that sits on top of that content management system and really allows us to target personalized content within those digital experiences. So when someone comes to our website, based on some information we have about who they are and which of those personas they fit into, or which of those audiences they fit into, which we'll talk about in a second. Where does that information come from? But based on that information, what content should we give them? And personalize that experience so that not everybody is seeing the same thing. We're giving different people different content within those experiences. That's Acquia Lift. Acquia Journey takes that same idea but extends it beyond the digital experiences managed through our content management system to coordinating our activities across channels. So this could include marketing and advertising, whether that's display or search or social. It could include messaging, like email messaging or app notifications, things like that. It could also include interactions we have with customers that are non-digital or not entirely digital. So someone calls into our customer service phone number, or someone comes to a physical location for a store or some other kind of organization that has physical locations. So it could coordinate activities across all of those, and really it's a way of chaining together those activities, and again making sure that we understand which audiences and segments someone belongs to, and sending them down the right path for them, the right next action for them in that process. Acquia, Lift, and Journey both depend on this component called Profile Manager. And this is really where we collect all of that data about those users and determine the segments and audiences that we use to do that personalization and orchestration. So these tools really work together to manage who people are and then saying, how do we target them with personalized content on our website through Lift, or personalized journey through Journey. So that's a basic overview of the Acquia tools we're talking about. On the Google side, Google Marketing Platform is a family of products sort of starting with Google Analytics, which many of you are probably familiar with. It's an analytics tool for measuring websites and apps, who comes to them, what they do, what they click on, all the details about what people do on those sites. And there's a family of related tools built around that are part of Google Marketing Platform. Google Tag Manager helps actually instrument all of that measurement and collecting the data to tools like Google Analytics and Acquia Profile Manager, for example. Data Studio is a reporting tool which helps report on all of that data, create easily used and distributed dashboards and things like that. But there are also a number of other tools that are part of Google Marketing Platform that are about data activation. Display and Video 360, for example, is a display and video advertising tool, as you might guess from the name. So it's about placement of display ads or video ads. And you can leverage the data from Google Analytics to target audiences across Google's sort of vast advertising networks for display and video. And likewise, if you use Google Ads, for example, or other tools there are other integrations for sharing those audiences from Google Analytics to some of the other Google Marketing Platform tools. So these tools together sort of complement the Acquia tools in a lot of ways. What they help us do is collect a lot of data, connect between the reporting tools that we have, which are really important to sort of understanding the outcomes here and really evaluating how well these experiences work and what's happening. And then also connecting to places where we might activate this data. So those display ads or video ads or search ads or things like that, which might be components of a journey that we've designed in Acquia Journey. Along the way there's all these different interactions that users take. Some of those are about these different advertising touch points that we might activate through the Google Marketing Platform. So that's a very brief overview of these two families of products. We can certainly talk lots and lots about both of these. We're, as Alex said, partners both with Acquia and with Google in talking about these products and how they work together and so on. I'm going to give you an example, sort of walk through an example for a particular journey here in a second. I do just want to mention one other set of products that are on this slide before I go on, which is, you might have noticed in the Google section here, there's some additional products. You'll see BigQuery, Data Lab, Cloud ML there. These are part of a different Google product family called Google Cloud Platform. This is a whole family of Google products around doing machine learning, data modeling, those kind of things. And again, there are some nice ties between these tools and the Google Marketing Platform. And so some of the kinds of analysis we talked about, like doing user clustering to understand personas, are easily done with these kind of tools. Like doing content attribution to understand which moments matter are often done through these kind of tools. And so one thing I do want to mention here is you may be aware that these Google tools, Google Analytics especially, there are free versions and paid versions. So there's Google Analytics, which is the free version that anyone can use and put on their website, doesn't cost any money. And then there's Google Analytics 360, which is sort of the paid enterprise version of Google Analytics. They both do the same basic tasks. They measure our websites and apps. They give us the data. They let us report on that data, et cetera. The advantages of Google Analytics 360, well, there are some sort of enterprise-oriented limitations that are, much higher there. So, you have higher traffic websites and things like that. You can get much higher limits to the amount of data you can collect with Google Analytics 360. But most importantly for this conversation, there are some additional integrations that are available. So that integration with BigQuery and these other machine learning tools, for example, is one that's available only in Google Analytics 360. So the point that I want to make here is if you already have Google Analytics 360, you're really well positioned to take advantage of all of these things that we're talking about. But even if you don't, if you just use the free version of Google Analytics, much of what we're talking about is possible with the free versions of these Google tools. Not all of the things, but many of the things. And so, and this is something we're going to come back to in a few minutes. This is not something you do all at once and just sort of wake up one day and say, let's do insight-driven journeys. It's a very much an incremental approach to getting here and doing this. And so certainly the free version of Google Analytics is a great starting point. At some point, you may want to think about Google Analytics 360, but it's not necessary to get started going down this road. So that's a pretty brief overview of the tools that we're talking about here and sort of what's involved in the implementation from a tool perspective. But I also want to point out that the implementation is also very much about process. And this, again, is where data comes in on the end of this as well. So the output of that implementation. The implementation isn't just we launch it and it's done and we wipe our hands and walk away, right? After the implementation, we really want to look at the performance of these journeys that we've designed, starting with, we have hopefully designed it to influence some KPIs, some conversions that we're trying to drive toward and understand those. And then, really it's an incremental approach in doing all the things that we talked about and making improvements to that journey. So, we start with this design and implementation, but within those, we really want to look for combinations of tactics that work best for different personas and experiment with different content and different tactics for personalization in the different steps of these journeys and see where we can incrementally make improvements to the way that those work. And again, the analysis here ranges from pretty simple and straightforward reporting and dashboarding, like you might do in Google Analytics or in Data Studio, to some of the more sophisticated kinds of analysis you might do with some of those machine learning tools and the integrations with Google Analytics 360, as I mentioned. So the implementation isn't just over, it's sort of a continuous program of conversion improvements that we would walk through. So just to bring this to life, I want to take a couple of minutes to illustrate this through a particular journey. I'm going to use an example from healthcare here, although the basic steps here you could really apply to any industry you might be in. And so I'm going to start, this is a particular example from the healthcare space about a journey and how we might think about that and how these tools sort of play a part in measuring that and understanding that. And so here this journey starts with some way that a user discovers us and who we are, maybe through something like an ad, in this case this was a Google ad, search ad on a Google search result, but some way that the user is sort of introduced to us. And this particular user, and this sort of goes to that idea of personas and how we're thinking about who our users are and what categories they fit into. This particular user is someone who's interested in information about high-risk pregnancy. So, they Googled here a phrase about high-risk pregnancy. Maybe, they have, had an appointment and gotten some information, or looking to understand that a little bit more and gather more information. And so, this was how they discovered us through this ad. The next step is, they click that ad, they come to our website. We have some landing page that is designed to give them some information. At this point, this user is anonymous. We don't know much about them. We know that they came from this particular campaign. So we know something about what they're interested in. And then as they interact with this content, we start to gather additional information about that. How do we gather that information? Well, we use some of these tools like Google Tag Manager to send that information to both Google Analytics, where we can report on it, as well as to Acquia Profile Manager. So you can see along the right-hand side there, we're starting to build a profile of this user, what they do, what we know about them, and what they're interested in. At this point, this user is still anonymous. We don't know who she is, but we have some information about what she's done and what campaign she's interacted with. Now, maybe a next step here, one of the options on this landing page is to sign up for our newsletter. And so if this user actually goes ahead and does that, now we have additional information about who she is and what she's interested in, right? Now we've identified this user. We know that she's Sarah Smith. We know she's explicitly interested in high-risk pregnancy. Before we had an idea of that based on the campaign that she came in on. We also know that she's a new patient because she has told us about that. And so, this profile continues to build and continues to collect more information about who this person is, and as a result of that, what personas she might fit into based on our previous analysis. So, now we have all this information. Maybe our next step here, she signed up for an email newsletter, so we send her an email. And here we're managing this process through Acquia Journey. We're coordinating the actions that happen across our advertising, our website, our email, and so on to really make sure that those are all in sync and she's getting a consistent message across all of these. We send her this email. She gets this email. We have additional data that we've gathered about her interactions with that email now. And then in addition, here she clicks through on the link on this email. And in this case, she actually used a different device. Here she used her mobile device to open up the link in this email that we sent her. And so now we have even more information about her and tying together her devices, her desktop and phone. And here, maybe our desired outcome was scheduling an appointment. Maybe it was, in this case, this particular example, it was downloading this pregnancy checklist is a KPI that this organization has identified. And so here, we're tracking that that is completed and she's downloaded this pregnancy checklist. Now, so, this person, this particular example was just sort of, one person plucked out of this whole process, right? The truth is that there are, many people that fit together in different personas. There are different paths and different actions that they can take. But these tools help us sort that out. They help us measure that. And at the end of this, they also help us understand that and maybe target other folks. So, now Sarah's downloaded this pregnancy checklist. Maybe we want to target her with some additional advertising or messaging after the fact, some retargeted display advertising or something like that. Great, we can do that through the display and video integrations with Google Analytics, for example. Or maybe we want to find lookalike audiences. We want to find people who are like Sarah to advertise some of our services to as well. And so we can do that same sort of thing through these advertising integrations as well. So that was one example that I hope sort of brings this idea to life. This is an idea of what the end state looks like, right? This is sort of putting all the tools together, putting all the pieces together, and constructing this journey that involves all of these pieces. Like I said, this isn't sort of a one-step thing, right? You don't just go from nothing to fully orchestrated journeys all in one step. And so I want to turn it back over to Alex to talk for a minute about digital marketing maturity and sort of how you get from just some campaigns and web content that are not connected to really thinking about these insight-driven journeys and putting it all together in the big picture.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. So as Jonathan mentioned, we don't expect that every organization out there today is necessarily ready to jump straight into insight-driven journeys, right? There is an element of data preparedness that first needs to happen. There's an element of maturity within the organization and buy-in within the organization that needs to happen. And so we have prepared here a series of 4 separate categories. This is sort of an introspective for everyone on the webinar to think through, where is your organization today in these 4 areas? Starting with cross-channel coordination. Are your marketing efforts today currently disjointed or coordinated? Is the messaging coordinated? Actually our back-end systems could be disjointed. All that really matters is, do our end users perceive the illusion of coordination? And if so, then we can begin to lay the groundwork for this insight-driven journey. Second, with the customer view, is it currently disconnected or synchronized? Do you even have access to the data for your customers, or is it much more siloed today? You know, we hear a lot about data warehouses, combining data from all sorts of different systems, and data lakes. In many cases, I like to think that these are more like data swamps. In 2019, we have APIs for all these systems, and really we can bring all this data together using a tool like Acquia Profile Manager. Third, is your journey orchestration today somewhat haphazard, or is it more informed? And this, I think, Jonathan went into a great deal about. Finally, can your customers take any path that they want? Is it quite adaptive, or is it much more rigid? You know, often we think as websites as hoping that our customers will just sort of follow the one path that we were expecting. But we may use data and we may identify that there are more valuable paths that we were not even expecting. And so to sort of look at it a different way, with this cross-functional coordination, I would ask, how well do you coordinate across organizational boundaries today? Do you feel like multiple organizations or a single entity to your audience? And remember, we can also create that illusion of being one system when in fact in the back end it's much more complex. We know that's the reality of many organizations. With the customer view, do you have a single view of audience information today? Is there information you need that isn't being collected yet? That's something that we can help with using Google Analytics and a comprehensive measurement strategy to determine which data are you missing, what are the gaps that you have today. And then we can consolidate all of that information into a tool like the Profile Manager at Acquia, or using BigQuery with Google Analytics 360. With journey orchestration, are you guessing what's important to your audience, or are decisions informed through insights? And we'll start with the insights that you have today in your analytics. We'll understand your existing goals and identify which paths, which content is making a difference. That's that content-based attribution modeling that Jonathan was speaking about. And finally, the content and path adaptation. Is your experience a one-size-fits-all, or is there variance by persona? And are personas based on best guesses or on data? So the way to start here is to really target a few initial personas that you might already have in mind. Again, you know your organization, you know what are the primary audiences, so begin there. And then you can use data to determine to focus on what's next. Google has commissioned a study that was performed by the Boston Consulting Group. This was in February of last year, to determine where are organizations on what they call the marketing maturity scale. So if you look across here, we have nascent organizations, emerging organizations, connected organizations, and multi-moment organizations. And I think some of us on the call might be in some of these former categories. And again, that's okay. Perhaps you really are media-centric right now. You're thinking about data, you're asking the right questions, but mainly you're just doing direct buys with limited links between sales and your marketing. Perhaps you're more emerging. We call this tech-centric. There's some use of own data in automated buying with single channel optimization and testing. In other words, you're beginning your testing, you're asking the right questions, but you're not quite connected yet. This third category, data-centric. Your data is integrated and activated across channels with a demonstrated link to ROI. So you can use data, you can determine which of these initiatives are actually producing the most return. And finally, the holy grail, if you will, the multi-moment, data-driven organizations using dynamic execution across multiple channels, optimized toward individual customer business outcomes and transactions across devices. So as you might expect, this last category is the hardest, right? It takes the most work. And as a result, in this study, Google found that only 2% of organizations can claim to be multi-moment, whereas 49% are really connected, which is really a great advancement from where the marketplace was just a few years ago. But 41% are still emerging, and still 7% are nascent today. So we think there's a lot of room for growth here in the marketplace. And again, we think that these are the expectations that people have when they're using our websites and interacting with our brand experiences. So what does the future look like? The solution that Jonathan has shared here gives you more time to focus on your audience's needs, no matter which touch points they use. This allows you to tell your brand story in a compelling way for different personas. People have different expectations and they have different requirements. And so can you tell that brand story in a compelling way for each of those audiences across devices? This really is that multi-moment that we were talking about. The key takeaways for us and for you: journey management is a discipline, not a tactic. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. Even with the tools in place, it will take effort and time and transformation, which is why there's a crawl, walk, run approach. If you have analytics today, you need to figure out how to orchestrate these journeys and to tie it all together in a consistent, personalized message with great ROI to be able to use data to determine if it's working and then to do more of that. You can use experimentation in order to do that. You can use big data using a tool like BigQuery to be able to identify your most valuable paths and your most valuable personas. So this third point, analytics really is core to understanding your customers and their behavior. It does not mean you have to have all the data in one place. The real world is messy. We like messy. We just need to start somewhere. And again, using tools like BigQuery or the Acquia Profile Manager can help. And finally, analytics is also core to proving the value from implementing personalized customer journeys and continuously refining and optimizing those experiences through experimentation. So where can you start today? We'll be happy to help. We can build demos and help you tell your brand story, for example. We can dig deeper. We can provide strategic direction. We can talk about how analytics can play a more critical role in helping to get value out of Acquia Lift and Acquia Journey. We can establish segments. We can help you to define content attribution models and those lookalike audiences to be able to say, I know that this is the persona that's most likely to convert. Let's find more people like this group of users. Third, if you have Google Analytics or Google Analytics 360, we can provide a marketplace leading perspective on how GA and Acquia can work together to drive results. Again, we think there's no more powerful combination of tools out there today than Google Analytics and Acquia Lift and Journey. And finally, if you want to learn more about Google Analytics, Bounteous can provide access to the best trainings in the United States. We have been doing this for over 10 years, providing public trainings all around the country and in Canada. We provide full-day trainings on Google Analytics, Google Ads, Display and Video 360, Google Optimize, Data Studio, Tag Manager, BigQuery, and more. And so if you visit our website, training.bounteous.com, you'll be able to sign up for one of these all-day trainings, and we would be happy to work more with you. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to the Acquia team. Thank you.
Excellent. Alex and Jonathan, thank you for your insight. This has been really a great session, and we still have a few minutes for questions. One came in early on, but maybe we can reference it here. And I'll read it to you, and maybe you can, one of you can take it. How do you scale an effective feedback process within a large enterprise business to adjust services, products, and communications or ad programs to improve the customer experience? So I guess that's the question. How do you scale an effective feedback process in a big business?
Yeah, scaling is a really important and smart question to ask. So thanks whoever did that. Because, on one hand, we want all of these experiences to feel like they're personalized for one, right? It's an experience for exactly one person. But on the other hand, on an enterprise scale, we can't do that. And so this is really what those audiences and personas are all about, is grouping together people who have similar needs and wants and desires so that we can address them together. And we can progressively learn about those and break them down into more specifics and so on. But it's really about dividing people into categories, into useful categories that are based on data. To address them in similar ways. And then, the ways that we address those personas can be adaptive. So they can, sort of adapt to the particular behavior of those users. But they're based on those personas. So they're, based on groups of people. And a big part of this, so, the technology is one challenge there, but another big part of this is organizational, which is that organizations are often structured so that the channels are sort of siloed, and it's, over here are the people who do website content, and over here are the people who do email marketing, and over here are the people who do, search marketing and whatever, right? And what we really need to be able to do is come together around those personas and think about, here's the high-risk pregnancy audience, and how do we address that audience across all of these channels? So that organizational part of it is also a big piece. And, among the most sort of innovative organizational responses to that I've seen are sort of cross-functional teams or pods of people who are focused on audiences rather than, broken up into teams by channel. So, this pod is responsible for high-risk pregnancy and diabetes and heart disease, for example. And, this pod is responsible for these audiences and so on. When people are really thinking about those audiences, those personas, then, this becomes a more digestible challenge. But that's an organizational challenge, not a technological one.
You just hit on something, and we've got time for really one quick answer for the question since we're coming up on a half hour. But something that dawns on me is where does an initiative like this begin? Who drives it? Who owns it? If an organization on the phone or on this webinar says we want to do something like this, really, where does the center of gravity exist in most organizations you work with?
Yeah, that's also a great question. And the thing about something like this is it takes a holistic view of the customer experience. And again, organizationally, organizations aren't always sort of set up to think about the customer experience in that way. So often what we see, because many of the sort of touch points we're talking about are driven by marketing teams, often it's marketing teams, director of marketing or CMO, who's sort of the driving force behind this. But it's really important to involve other parts of the organization, sort of all of the touch points that users or customers deal with. So that includes customer service, that includes sales, that includes any sort of touch points where the user has some experience. We want to make sure we get perspectives from those, and eventually are sort of looking at that customer's experience across all of those channels.
Excellent. I know we're coming up at the end of the hour. There's a couple of questions that we didn't get to, but we will answer those offline and provide an answer to the person who submitted. I'll pass it back to Bridget for some housekeeping and closing notes.
So thank you all again for attending our webinar today. As I said previously, slides and the recording of the webinar will be posted to acquia.com and also sent to you via email within the next couple days. If you have additional questions, please send them to our presenters, whose emails are listed on this slide, or go to marketing@theacquiateam.com. Thank you again and have a great day.